Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, the cost of health insurance is going up in 2026. Millions of people are faced with sticker shock.
I spoke to a lot of people who didn't know, who found out this would impact them and are now kind of scrambling to figure out what they might do because of the cost burden that it's going to place on them.
A mountain farmer kept an encrypted diary for years. It's unclear whether he would have wanted that code to ever be cracked.
For 50 years, he's keeping this code, so he kept them for such a long time that I can't imagine he could have just thrown them away.
And a beloved West Virginia hot dog restaurant closed in 2018. An annual tribute sale gives people a chance to relive its glory days.
People think it's just a hot dog. It's more than a hot dog. You don't see a line like it's at Dairy Queen. It's childhood coming back. You know what I mean?
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by the COPD Foundation, offering educational materials and information on COPD symptoms, treatments, and diagnoses. Learn more at copdfoundation.org. Support for this program is provided by the Thrasher Group, an architecture, engineering, and field services firm serving West Virginia clients and communities since 1983. More information at thethrashergroup.com. Support for this program is brought to you by Solar Holler, helping Appalachian businesses and nonprofits manage energy costs through solar power. Information at solarholler.com.
Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. People who buy healthcare through the federal marketplace are set to see big spikes in their premiums next year. Depending on where you live, your age, and whether you have kids, your premiums could rise 40% or more. Ruby Rayner is a reporter for the Chattanooga Times-Free Press who's been covering this story as it plays out in Tennessee. We spoke in late October when the federal government was still shut down, but we think this conversation's still relevant.
Ruby Rayner, thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia to speak with us.
Thanks for having me.
So your story in the Chattanooga Times-Free Press is headlined, "I Might Die. Subsidy Loss Could Affect 500,000 Tennesseans." That is a striking headline. What's going on there?
Yeah, so there are 500,000 people in Tennessee who buy health insurance on the ACA, Affordable Care Act marketplace, which is healthcare.gov. And most all of those people receive ACA subsidies, also called enhanced subsidies, also called premium tax credits. All of those names encapsulate these premium health subsidies, which help people pay their health insurance premium every month and subsidize that through the federal government. And those are expiring at the end of this year. And so that title refers to the amount of people in Tennessee who would lose that subsidy come the end of the year. And for many people like Cherry Roberts, who is a local to Chattanooga, she depends on that healthcare subsidy to pay her monthly health insurance premium and be able to afford her health insurance coverage. And for her, she depends on her healthcare to get life-sustaining care. And so without the ability to be able to pay for her healthcare and then receive said healthcare, she's really afraid for what's at stake for her own. And that's true of many, many people.
This is an issue that people are facing across the U.S. and here in Appalachia too. But it seems like an especially big deal for Tennessee. Why is that?
So Tennessee there's a handful of states in a similar position, but it didn't decide as a state to expand with Medicaid. In 2014, there was, many states expanded their Medicaid coverage so more people could get that federal subsidized healthcare coverage, and Tennessee wasn't one of those states. So there isn't as great of a ability for Tennesseans to access healthcare assistance from the government. And so that means that programs like the ACA enhanced premium subsidies are really vital and a bigger portion of the pie in terms of assistance for people who might not necessarily be able to afford healthcare insurance. So there's just less people in Tennessee who qualify for Medicaid in general. And so there's more people who might seek this program. And so with the end and expiration of the enhanced subsidies, it's going to be kind of a bigger chunk of that pie that Tennessee has of what we offer in terms of federal assistance related to healthcare.
At the time we're recording, the federal government is still shut down, and these enhanced subsidies are part of that discussion. But Congress is deadlocked over this question. Can you explain a little bit about what's going on in D.C., and do you see a path forward?
Currently, as you said, when we're recording, it's now the fourth week of the government shutdown, which means Congress hasn't been able to agree on a budget to fund the federal government. And so without a budget, the government shuts down because there's no funding to get to those different services and keep it running. And what's happened is that the Democrats have kind of leveraged the government shutdown in order to say, we're not going to agree on a budget to reopen the government unless we can all agree for a permanent extension of these enhanced subsidies. So that's what the Democrats have been saying and have kept voting in accordance to that ask of, we will not reopen the government unless there is a permanent extension of these healthcare subsidies. As of now, there hasn't been any type of conversation towards a path forward in that. As of today, there's been 13 votes in the Senate, and they've all failed. The Democrats have voted against what's called a continuing resolution, which is to extend the budget, saying, nope, we are not going to do that unless we can agree on a permanent extension. The House hasn't come back. That's where there might be some space for a discussion around passing legislation around a permanent extension. That hasn't happened yet, and there hasn't been any kind of serious conversations about what it would look like to pass legislation around a permanent extension.
So 500,000 Tennessee residents receive federal healthcare subsidies to help pay for health insurance premiums. A lot of folks in Appalachia do too. But your story suggests that rolling back these subsidies could have bigger implications for healthcare providers. How are they affected?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different larger implications beyond the actual increase in price that people might have to pay without the subsidies. One is that health insurance companies are expecting this expiration. And with the expectation that people won't be able to afford to continue to purchase health insurance on the marketplace without these enhanced subsidies, they are going to forego health insurance. They either can't afford it, or another likely option is that they are pretty healthy and it's a big increase in money per month that you're spending, and people are like, it's not quite worth it. And so with that expectation, health insurance companies have raised the actual price, the rate that they're charging for insurance more than in past years with that expectation. So there's two things going on at the same time. There's the actual enhanced subsidy that's going to expire at the end of the year that would raise somebody's monthly premium. And then there's the actual rate of insurance that's also going up more than in past years. So for Tennessee in 2025, from major insurance companies on the marketplace, rates increased from like 1% to 3%. And in 2026, the proposed rates from these insurance companies, the same ones, range from 30 to 40%. So that's a significant increase. So that's one of the other ripple effects of the enhanced subsidies. And that estimate for Tennessee from KFF is that there's going to be 200,000 people who will become uninsured without the enhanced subsidies. The other thing is that healthcare experts expect that there's going to be an increase in the cost of uncompensated care, which means more people are going to forgo care because they don't have health insurance, and they're going to maybe wait longer to go to the doctor for smaller issues until they get maybe more serious. And then they're going to seek help through the hospital system, which puts a greater weight on the hospital. And people then might not be able to pay those hospital bills. And then the hospital has to take that cost burden on themselves, which weighs on the hospital system and their own finances. Particularly in Tennessee, there's been a high number of closures of hospitals. So that's another aspect of how there's concern over how that might continue to put weight on the hospital system and lead to potentially more closures in Tennessee.
What else haven't we talked about? Are there other angles you think are important to bring up that we haven't mentioned?
I think one thing that, let's say there was an agreement in Congress to permanently extend the subsidies, the actual rate increase that I talked about, that's significantly more in years past because of the expectation that they're ending, that's not going to likely change. Insurance companies submit their rates way in advance for approval. And so even if Congress is able to reach some type of agreement to permanently extend these subsidies, those rates are going to have that further increase because they were expecting this expiration. And secondarily, it's unprecedented in which if there was a permanent extension, that then how would the subsidies be retroactively given to people? So that's a kind of question mark. I talked to a couple of different insurance companies in Tennessee last week, and they're not sure. They follow what the federal government tells them in terms of how these kind of processes work. And that's kind of a big unknown within the industry of it's a wait and see type of situation of how that would be dealt with if it's the case. So that's a question mark. I think the other thing that's important is that I spoke to a lot of people who don't know what insurance they have. So when you buy insurance on the marketplace, you're buying from name brands that might feel like it's not quote unquote government subsidized health insurance. So it's Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's Cigna, it's names that you might recognize as private insurance. And so you might not even identify yourself or someone you're friends with or your family as potentially being affected by this come open enrollment on November 1st or in the new year. There's a lack of awareness. I spoke to a lot of people who didn't know, who found out this would impact them and are now kind of scrambling to figure out what they might do because of the cost burden that it's going to place on them.
Ruby Rayner, thank you so much for coming on and speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Ruby Rayner is a reporter at the Chattanooga Times Free Press. We've linked her story on healthcare subsidies. It's at our website, wvpublic.org. Across Appalachia, residents are seeing cryptocurrency operations pop up. In Bulls Gap, Tennessee, residents are fighting plans for a propane-fueled Bitcoin mine. This is after over more than a year of disruption from a nearby gas flare that disrupted the town's once peaceful rural life. WUOT's Pierce Gentry has more.
Bulls Gap is a small community of just a few hundred people situated on rolling farmland in Hawkins County. A former market town revolving around a vital rail junction, today Bulls Gap is mostly known for its quiet farmsteads. But that quiet was disrupted for many farmers along Highway 66 when a $15 million fractionation plant opened up next door. It sells ethane products to the Holston Electric Company to produce electricity for locals. With it came a pipe towering 45 feet over the community, topped by a brilliant orange flame that produces a tremendous noise, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a gas flare, constantly burning off excess ethane gas that isn't fit to be sold to Holston Electric. It's made life for those who live along this once quiet road difficult. Cynthia Trentham lives on a farm across the street.
Things have just been growing and changing, and it's really disrupted the whole community since it got here.
Trentham's husband, Mike, drives cattle on their farm. He says the flame isn't just loud and distracting, it bothers his animals.
But in the past, I had no trouble loading calves to take them to market. Since the flame came, I have a heck of a time getting the calves in the barn on the trailer. They are very, very, very skittish.
The Trenthams and their neighbors have had to put up blackout curtains to shield their windows from the light generated by the flare at night. Life went on this way for over a year. Then, 2 months ago, locals learned of plans to build a propane-fueled Bitcoin mine adjacent to the gas plant.
A lot of us didn't really understand. They would say mining. Are they going to dig for something? You know, what are they doing?
Crypto mining operations rely on this type of confusion in the communities they target for development. They often look for small, rural areas with cheap land and plentiful energy, places like Bulls Gap. And they do so without asking people if they want a Bitcoin mine next door.
And people just don't want this. This is not your run-of-the-mill data center.
That's Cindy Robertson, a member of the National Coalition Against Crypto Mining, an advocacy group with a presence in 21 states.
People who live by crypto mines, they almost feel like they're losing their mind.
Kentucky-based cryptocurrency startup Exotic Ridge insists their Bitcoin mine in Bulls Gap won't be noisy or disruptive to the community. But local mother Julie Atkins, who lives across the street from the proposed development, isn't so sure.
It would be like standing next to a running motorcycle while you're trying to sleep, while you're trying to think, while you're eating, while everything. And so for a growing body and a growing mind of a child, that would be a very large concern for me.
Atkins says Exotic Ridge has made promises to the community to try and get them on board. At a county commission meeting, they claim that by buying excess ethane from the gas plant, they'll completely eliminate the obtrusive gas flare. Still, community members remain skeptical.
They wanted to sweet talk the community and say, hey, this is an issue that you guys are dealing with. Let us come in, let us harness that flame, let us use that energy and put it towards something. However, when I spoke with my neighbors, we were all in favor of the light pollution rather than the sound pollution.
Locals mobilized quickly to oppose the development, and it worked. At a September meeting of the Hawkins County Commission, a moratorium was placed on all crypto mining development. Some people have expressed doubt about the legality of such a measure, though. WUOT News tried to reach representatives of the Hawkins County government and Exotic Ridge for the story, but all declined to comment. It leaves locals worried about the future.
I hate to say this, but I'm not extremely confident that it's entirely out of the question that it will move here. I don't think it's going to happen today, but I pray that it doesn't happen even a decade from now.
In Bulls Gap, I'm Pierce Gentry.
Later in the show, a coded diary became the foundation of a new book. You're inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by the Charleston, West Virginia Convention and Visitors Bureau, featuring family-friendly activities such as Holly Jolly Brawley and Light the Night at Go-Mart Ballpark this holiday season. Details at charlestonwv.com.
For generations, Skinny's Hot Dogs in Sissonville, West Virginia was known for serving some of the best slaw dogs around. The restaurant closed in 2018, but still comes alive for the annual Skinny's tribute sale at Thanksgiving, giving devoted Skinny's fans a few days to make up for lost time. Last year, Folkways reporter Zach Harold went to Skinny's and brought us this story.
Have you ordered?
No.
Can I stand here while you order?
No,
I'm doing this for West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Oh, okay.
I want to get the sound of somebody.
Oh, okay.
Order it.
I'm getting 10.
So who are the 10 for?
Huh? Dude, it's for me.
Donald Whitey White used to be a Skinny's hot dogs regular.
Give me 10 with everything.
He would swing by in his wrecker on his way to rescue some stranded motorist and pick up a couple hot dogs.
And everybody get my record, and they said, you had it Skinny's, didn't it? Because it's got the smell that nobody else, the onions, they stay in your car.
But then, in March 2018, owner Andy Skeen died of a short illness. He was just 59 years old. Andy had no children, so his sister Karen was the only one left who knew the family recipe for Skinny's legendary chili and slaw. About a month before her brother passed, she asked him about carrying on that legacy.
And he said, no, go ahead and let it die with me.
See, long ago, Andy and Karen's father, Andy Sr., the restaurant's founder, sought to make Skinny's a nationwide brand, and even had the restaurant franchised in 13 states. But he found that the bigger the company got, the harder it was to control the quality of the product. So he yanked the franchise licenses and vowed that only his direct descendants would ever operate Skinny's. Karen's brother took over the place when he got older, but at her family's encouragement, she made a life outside the food business, becoming a successful court reporter. And even though she would now be the last of their proud lineage, her brother was adamant that running the restaurant was just too much for her.
He said, I don't want you working in here every day like we did 7 days a week, all these hours, worrying, all the time with it.
Seeing the restaurant shut down was hard on fans like Donald. He would fantasize about pulling in and grabbing a couple of those onion-heavy hot dogs.
Because I live right out the road there. And I was like, I told that lady all the time, I said, I'm sorry, give me a skinny hot dog.
It was hard on Karen, too.
It's a part of me. It's an integral part of me. And I just felt sad to let it go.
So she decided she just wouldn't let it go.
All right, so we steam our buns here. We steam our wieners here. And then
Karen lives in Florida, but still comes back to West Virginia each Thanksgiving to see her extended family. So in 2022, in the days leading up to Turkey Day, she made 40 gallons of chili and chopped 100 pounds of cabbage to make slaw. She ordered 2,000 wieners and buns. And on that Black Friday, she flicked on the neon open sign. The line of customers didn't end for 10 straight hours.
We didn't expect the crowds. We were out of everything the first day, and we just were sitting there. What are we going to do? We have to get more buns. We have to get more hot dogs. We have to make more chili.
That night, she had to dispatch her cousins to run out and buy ingredients for the next day. And knowing she couldn't sling hot dogs for another 10 hours all by herself, she called in reinforcements.
She had messaged me and said, Linda, can you come help?
Linda Traup worked for the restaurant for several years in the 2000s, and Karen knew she was one of the best employees they ever had. The next day, she was right there in the trenches with Karen. Since then, Linda has returned each Thanksgiving weekend to help Karen run the Skeeny's Tribute Sale.
I mean, this is the best 2 days for me. It really is, of the year. I enjoy it. I do.
Hard work, though.
It is. I mean, my back is hurting, but it's worth it.
Karen has recruited a few more helpers through the years, but it remains a skeleton crew. And yet, in 2024, they made 3,500 hot dogs over 2 days. The flood of customers and small staff leads to long days and long lines. But nobody in the kitchen seems to mind.
I asked my team about an hour ago, and we're all dead. I said, do you guys think I should do it again next year? They're all, do you guys think I should do it again next year?
Yes.
That was unanimous.
They do it for the same reason Karen's dad was such a stickler for quality. They want to make the customers happy. And despite the long waits, the customers seem to be.
I mean, they wait an hour and a half in the cold and the snow, and they thank us.
Michael Hutchinson is used to waiting in front of Skeeny's. This is where he used to catch the school bus.
I was in the drawing, and I drew a race car because my family's in the racing, and she had it taped right here for the lot of years. And I put Skeeny's on the quarter panel of it, so I got free hot dogs every now and again when nobody was around.
This year, he brought his 15-year-old daughter Antoinette to have her own Skeeny's hot dog.
People think it's just a hot dog. It's more than a hot dog. You don't see a line like it's at Dairy Queen. It's childhood coming back, you know what I mean?
That's true for Karen, too.
Whenever I would come home to visit them, I would come in this restaurant before I went to the house because that's where I'd always find them. And so when I have these sales, I feel like it's where I still find them.
With the sale over, Skeeny's now sits darkened. There's nowhere to buy the indescribably different slaw dogs promised by the billboard that sits above this little restaurant. Karen hopes to return home and bring this place back to life in November. Until then, memory will just have to suffice. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Zach Harold in Sissonville, West Virginia.
Danielle, 4 with everything. Thank you so much. Thank you for waiting.
Zach tells us the Skeeny's tribute sale is on again for 2025. That story is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in Appalachia. Find more Folkways stories at our website, wvpublic.org. More than a quarter of adult West Virginians serve as caregivers for family members. That can take its toll, both emotionally and physically. WVPB News Director Eric Douglas was a caregiver for his mother until her death earlier this year. Eric recently spoke with Jane Marks, the state president of the American Association of Retired Persons, about the organization's new report on caregiving.
You know, I remember 2 years ago, shall we say, when I was talking to my mom 10 times a day before we actually moved her into care, but and I didn't feel like I could go to a baseball game, or I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do because I knew mom was going to call, and I had to be there and be there available for her. It was tough.
I was in a conversation with somebody this week, and she was saying that it seemed like every time she went out of town, because we were both at a national AARP meeting this past week, and she said, every time I go out of town, I get that call about my mother. And I laughed and said, every single time I went out of town, that's when my mother fell. Every time.
Give me your definition of what a caregiver is.
Well, to me, the caregiver is that person who either oversees the care or provides extensive care for a loved one, family member, a spouse, who can't adequately care for themselves.
I know you, ARP, not just you, but AARP broadly released new caregiving data. I'm 58. We find ourselves in that range where we still have children that we're looking after, sort of, but we also have parents that we're looking after. So give me some numbers. Tell me what the condition or the situation is in West Virginia.
Well, the situation in West Virginia is 26%. 26%. That's more than a quarter of West Virginians are caring for someone or acting as a caregiver. I'm not a math person, but that's roughly 375,000 people. But if you step back and realize, as a small state, over a quarter of our adults here in West Virginia are caregivers. That's something that clearly we need to pay attention to. And we need to provide them with as much support and resources as we can, because they're doing a tough job, as you and I.
What does that do to the caregiver? What's some of the effects of that for a caregiver?
Some of the effects are 1 in 4 caregivers express the fact that they are having their own health issues related to the stress and the challenges of caregiving. Many West Virginia caregivers are spending their own money, and sometimes that's hard. I mean, it's hard enough to feed your own family and cover all those bills. But if you're having to also reach into your pocket, it's estimated that caregivers spend about, on average, $7,000 annually of their own money in providing supplies and other things that the person for whom they're caring might need. So again, it can be a financial challenge. It's certainly a physical challenge. You're not getting sleep. We talked about that 3 a.m. phone call, Dad fell. But you're also distracted if you're working, and a good many West Virginia caregivers are still out there in the workforce. And so you're trying to balance that. You're trying to do your job, if you will, while you've got this other major job that you're trying to shoulder as well. So it's certainly very stressful. It certainly has a financial impact on you as well.
What can we do to help those people?
Well, first of all, AARP always focuses on having adequate dollars in her home and community-based services budget, in the state budget, because we know that certainly folks prefer to stay at home in their own home if they can. But we also know that it stays the state money, so we're always focusing on that. But one of the things that we worked on last year, and of course it didn't go anywhere, so we're going to push it again this year, is a tax credit for family caregivers. It won't take away completely that financial burden that they may be facing, but it can certainly be a help.
Pie in the sky, what do you want to see happen?
Pie in the sky, first of all, I want to see caregivers acknowledged for the hard work that they're doing. Our new CEO, Dr. Maisha Minter-Jordan, says that family caregivers are the backbone of our healthcare and long-term care system. Caregivers across the country are providing what it's valued at, all right, are you ready for this? $63 billion with a B, $63 billion worth of care. So if these people had to be placed in long-term care or someone had to pay for their care, we're providing $63 billion worth of that care. So I think it's important that we recognize that we give family caregivers the attention and the kudos that they deserve.
That was AARP of West Virginia President Jane Marks, speaking with Eric Douglas. Visit our website to read a longer version of this interview. With Thanksgiving on its way, what to do with those Halloween pumpkins that are getting long in the tooth? WVPB's Chris Schultz reports that decorative pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns can find a second life on your table and in the garden.
Roughly 1.4 billion pounds of pumpkins are grown across the country each year. The American Farm Bureau Federation estimates that almost 70% of those pumpkins are grown to harvest fresh and end up on front porches and stoops every fall. But once they've served their prettifying purpose, those millions of pounds of decorations can mean tons of methane, a potent greenhouse gas, if pumpkins are sent to the landfill. Hannah Finchman is a West Virginia University Extension agent serving Randolph County. She's also a farmer that grows a lot of pumpkins.
It's really great. It has a lot of fiber, potassium, magnesium, iron, lots of vitamins and minerals. Pumpkin is excellent for you. So it's really a great thing to try and add to your diet, especially in the fall when they are so prevalent.
Fincham says any pumpkin is edible. You can eat a carving pumpkin, as long as it's not carved. But it won't be as sweet as a smaller pie pumpkin that's grown specifically for making puree and pies. And that's okay, because pumpkins aren't just for desserts.
Pumpkin can be eaten in a lot of ways. Pumpkin soup, pumpkin pasta. You can put pumpkin in cakes as a substitute for oil.
Fincham says there are some basic safety considerations to keep in mind. If you plan on trying your hand at eating your fall decorations, you may want to bring it inside before the season's first hard frost. Fincham says foods that have been allowed to freeze and thaw are no longer safe to consume.
If it's been sitting on the porch and it hasn't been completely frozen and thawed, you're just looking for making sure there's no deep bruises or soft spots, and it still has the stem on it. So if the stem has fallen off or broken off, it's most likely not going to be a good pumpkin for eating.
If pumpkin isn't on your menu in the coming weeks, freezing them in chunks is also a favorite in the Fincham household. But she says canning raises red flags.
Pumpkins can be safely preserved by canning, but whereas we can purchase pumpkin puree that has been commercially canned, it's not safe to can our own pumpkin puree because the puree is too thick for the home canning process.
Like canning puree, eating carved pumpkins is a non-starter for Fincham, but that still doesn't mean that gourd should go in the garbage. Joshua Poplowski, Agricultural Natural Resource Extension Agent for Greenbrier County, says composting is a great option for those old jack-o'-lanterns or any pumpkin not suitable for consumption. He says composting not only provides nutrients for garden beds, it also helps keep food waste out of landfills.
Anytime that we put food waste and material into a anaerobic environment where there's no oxygen, we're going to produce methane, and that methane's going to add to the overall detriment that it does produce within our environment. And we can easily avoid that by throwing those pumpkins out into our compost bins.
If you or your neighbors don't compost, Poplowski says pumpkins can still avoid the trash heap by being fed to animals, as long as they haven't been painted and are cleared of candle wax and other inorganic material.
You know, the pigs love them, the cows love them, and a lot of times the ones that end up on our compost pile at home, after a good snowfall, it seems like the deer and the wildlife seem to find those as well for a late winter snack, it seems to be.
Poplowski says your local extension office can help get you into contact with local farmers and producers to donate old pumpkins to feed animals or add to their compost. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Chris Schultz in Morgantown.
William Thomas Preston was a Southern farmer who lived and died in the 19th century. His story might have been lost to time, but Preston kept journals, which he wrote in code. More than 100 years later, after the diaries were discovered and decrypted, North Carolina writer Jeremy B. Jones set about using the diaries to tell Preston's story, and his own. Jones was Preston's great-great-great-great-grandson. Bill Lynch spoke with Jones about Cypher, the book that came out of his exploration.
Would you like to read something from the book?
Sure, I can do that. I can maybe just read from the first page. I'll censor a couple words. In 1859, a forgettable man died. He left behind bedclothes, a spyglass, cooking pots, and an umbrella. He left history books and algebra books and mineralogy books and Greek grammar books and astrology books, a compass, millstones, half chains, feather beds, dead sons, living daughters, and grandchildren soon to scatter. There were also debts that this landholding and his scattershot of personal property sold for $11.94 couldn't pay off. He entered the ground penniless in late November. Only stashed somewhere in his wake was everything. His whole life recorded in tiny handmade notebooks. On those pages, he logged his first love, his wedding, the births of his children, the death of his mother, the 1821 eclipse, the hanging of Frankie Silver, O'Neill's child peeing on his handkerchief, and dreams about murdering children and fleeing to Georgia. All this he scratched onto pages he never intended anyone to read. He concealed each entry in an invented cipher so that when he left this earth, his coded pages would be tossed away, forgotten, and turned to ash. But someone picked them up, or someone neglected to throw them out with the unwanted grammar books. Somehow, either by accident or providence, the hand-sewn notebooks survived the Civil War, Reconstruction, the Depression, 2 world wars, rain, snow, sleet. Over 100 years after the man himself faded away, his pages resurfaced in a sagging house, more than 100 miles away from his body and debts and descendants. The house had been abandoned, but stacked up somewhere inside were 50 years' worth of symbols, waiting to be cracked open.
How could you not want to read the rest of that? Jeremy, first, just explain how and why you decided to take on a project like Cypher. It's history and memoir. How did you get there?
May feel a little silly to say, like I didn't choose it, it chose me, but I did kind of stumble upon news of the diaries by accident. And then for a little while, they were just kind of like a strange curiosity that I would just read through and tell people about, and I didn't have any intention of writing about them in any sustained way. And I think after I spent a lot of time with them, and then like this perfect storm of things happened where we had our first kid, and I was thinking in these big existential ways about, what's getting passed on and what we're inheriting. I was also not sleeping a ton, so I was like maybe not in my right mind, and so having to entertain these thoughts in more kind of strange ways. So I wrote this essay for Oxford American at the time and kind of thought that would be it. And then I realized when it came out, there was so much I hadn't said and like so many questions I still had that it sort of slowly turned into a book project. And really, I think the question I've been telling people is that, I think a lot of people are into genealogical research, at least passively. The question I think ultimately people arrive to is like, why does it matter? And I think that's the question that kind of drives the book. Like, I have this strange guy whose journals are laid bare for me, but what does it mean for me, or why does it matter, for my life?
To me, it always seems like the idea of writing a diary or a journal, if you keep them, that you eventually think that some audience will read them. Your ancestor here created a code. Did he ever expect them to be found, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my initial answer was no, but I actually was at I did an event last week in Iowa City, and someone asked about like the sort of ethical considerations of writing about someone's diaries who hid them and probably didn't expect anyone to read them. And there were like some interesting responses in the audience. Somebody was like, "He's dead. It doesn't matter." So that's one answer. But another answer I think was what you said. Like if he wrote them down and saved them, probably a part of him expected someone to see them or read them, and at some stage. I don't know. For 50 years, he's keeping this code, so he kept them for such a long time that I can't imagine he could have just thrown them away. But it does raise the question of like why we do it. Why do we keep diaries? Is it completely private and personal, or is there something public kind of embedded in there? In any event, his are kind of public now. So I think like the questions that I found buried in there, even if they were hidden, for me had these broader implications. So it felt worth pulling them out, into the world.
The interest in ancestors. Do you see that as more of a Southern Appalachian thing, a preoccupation?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I do I grew up in a pretty rural place, and my teachers, I remember there was a cemetery near our school, and we would go over and like take our paper and kind of chalk or crayon on them to get the headstones and then take them back. And I was telling somebody about that recently, and they thought it was the strangest thing, but it did feel really normal then. It was like a way to learn about history. So maybe there was like a cultural component. I think for me and for a lot of people I grew up around, and I don't know if this is just a rural thing or how connected it is to region, but people tend to kind of stay put. And so in a way, it makes the genealogical work easier. Like everybody's been, in my case, on one piece of land for like 5 generations. And so some of the digging around is easier than if you've moved around or you're a recent immigrant. Those questions are harder. But I do think there's like more of an awareness of, for better or worse, our kind of like regional histories, maybe in Appalachia and in the South.
With this book and with working on it, any uncomfortable parallels between you and William Prestwood?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of unexpected parallels. Some of them felt kind of comfortable. Like the fact that he was a writer and a teacher made me feel like, oh, maybe there's something in my genes here. But then I think there were some unexpected and sort of uncomfortable things I started noticing. And, a sort of small, maybe obvious one that I didn't expect is that when he starts keeping his journals, he's 20. I was 30 when I first learned about them. I've been working on this book for like 10 years. So reading it, at first he was younger than I was at the time. And then, of course, as I read through his diaries, he outpaces me and gets much older than me. And so I was reading them in these really different ways. And one way it was kind of reflective, and then it became almost predictive, like trying to imagine what my life might be like at his age. And when he hits middle age and has a bunch of small kids in his house, and he's been married for a while, and he's writing that he and his wife are fighting a lot, there are just all these like middle age concerns that appeared despite the 200 years difference that felt pretty, commonplace. And so not a lot of like very obvious parallels, but I think just like these big questions about who am I? What do I do? What does it mean to be a father versus, the person I was 5, 10 years ago? I think I was thinking about those things already, but when I've encountered them in his diaries, for example, in 1827, 1828, he sent west to make a map of Macon County, which had been, Cherokee land for a few years prior. And you can just sort of feel that he's glad to get to leave for a little while. Like he sort of wants the open space. He even like sleeps outside of hotels for a little while and just like stays out. There's like 2 boarding houses in Franklin at the time, and he's like just sleeping out under the stars. And not that I'm like desperate to escape my family, but when my kids are really small, I just remembered the like almost guilty bliss I would have when I would have to go teach somewhere for a day or two and get to sleep in a hotel and not set an alarm. I felt guilty, but also like great. And so I think there were small parallels like that started showing up in the diaries the more that I read them.
Obviously, you got a translation of the diaries because someone had to break the code and figure it out. But I think in the book you mentioned maybe even wanting to learn the code. Did you ever do that? Did you ever sort of figure out how to do what he did?
Yeah, the code's a simple substitution code is what code breakers call it. So it's just like a Greek or Latin character or a number often substituted in for the English letter. And I figured it out enough, but then I have a cousin who's kind of a math brain who wrote a computer code for me so that I can type and hit encrypt and it will put it in my ancestor's code. And then I can, the same way, like decrypt his code. So I found other ways to do it. But I did, like as you said, that it had already been transcribed and decoded. But there were some times when I was like, is that right? And I would go back to the originals and have to sort of decode it myself to just confirm what the code breaker had written. So I don't think I became like a skilled cryptanalyst, but I did learn enough of the code that I could go in and decipher it.
Okay, since the book, have you gone back to his diaries?
A little bit. Some of it, the intention was promotional. I would go back and like say, like, here's what he was doing 150 years ago. But then I would find myself pulled in and reading again and finding things. But I think there's still more material in there if I kept digging. And so I have gone back some and seen what else is there.
What comes next for you?
What's funny is that when I first found these diaries, I sent some screenshots to my agent at the time, and she said, that's great. You should write a novel. Like you've got source material here to write a novel, a historical novel. And that wasn't what interested me about the diaries. I was interested in the family connections and the strange, like, frankly, the strange sort of syncopation of his entries and like the weirdness of them. And I felt like that would have been lost in a novel. That said, I think I am working on a novel now, not based on his life, but I think as a kind of gateway, a lot of writing about him required some speculative sort of stepping into the past and trying to piece his life together like a novelist might. And so I am working on a novel now try to kind of flex those muscles a little bit more.
Cypher is available from Blair, Carolina Wren Press. People have spent years arguing over how to lift folks out of poverty. One idea that's been discussed, but not tried so much, is what's known as UBI. That stands for Universal Basic Income, or simply paying out cash. More than 500 residents in Mercer County, West Virginia, all of whom are living at or close to the poverty line, will receive $1,500 a month for 16 months. The hope is that the windfall will make a difference, not just for the recipients, but for Mercer County as well. WVPB's Maria Young reports.
At the popular Dab's Country Cooking in Princeton, the applause couldn't come often enough. For the tasty spread, for the generous benefactor and his multi-million-dollar investment into this struggling community, but mostly for the rare sense of hope it brings for some folks who've had precious little of that.
Mr. Atwood, I don't know that words could adequately describe how really positive this impact is going to be. The rise
Administered through the New York-based nonprofit Give Directly, the program is called Rural Income for Self-Empowerment Guaranteed Minimum Income, or RISE GMI. It uses philanthropic funds from wealthy benefactors to give cash benefits directly to those in need. 550 recipients will be selected from Mercer County.
And it's meeting people where they are, it's understanding their unique situations, where they are, and then giving them the opportunity to play a part, to play a role in pulling themselves out of poverty into self-sufficiency.
Travis Helmandala is the Chief Operating Officer for Community Action of Southeastern West Virginia, or CASE-WV. His program handles everything from Head Start and child nutrition to senior services and transportation. He's helped several people apply for the funding already and knows there are countless ways those funds could help.
One young person would use the funds to purchase a reliable vehicle so they can get to work and make an effective living. Stories like a young mother whose hopeful excitement of having funds to pay for her grocery bills without having to go in debt using a credit card.
Alicia Crawford is the eye care facilitator for Mercer County Public Schools, where she says there are always more needs than resources.
Children that are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness or any of these issues that we've talked about, that's very hard for them to learn. It's very hard for them to focus when they're in school because they don't know when they're getting their next meal or where they're sleeping that night.
There's a determined spirit here, but like the abandoned homes and barns fading into the landscape, it too has been worn down by the decades, the generations of poverty. Flickers of hope are so rare that when Laura Keene, the U.S. Program Director for Give Directly, first contacted aid workers in Mercer County to discuss the program, most of them thought it was a scam.
So with $1,500 in a place of relatively low cost of living like Mercer County, we're really hopeful that people will be able to take these funds and make investments in themselves and their families.
Give Directly has overseen scores of other programs like this one. Since 2017, they've delivered about $300 million in payments to low-income Americans in all 50 states.
The first question we get from skeptics or, the curious is, aren't people just going to waste the money? Won't they spend it on drugs and alcohol? And there's an overwhelming body of evidence that shows that that is not the case. And if anything, people actually spend less on those types of goods than when they weren't receiving the cash.
Along with two other counties, one in North Carolina, one in Mississippi, the program is coming to Mercer County because, well, that's where Jeff Atwood's dad was raised, along with 3 older siblings by his single mom in the coal mining town of Matoka. It was a hard scrabble life, and yet Atwood Sr. ultimately thrived, in large part due to the help from his community. What bothered his successful software-developing son was the fact that, all these years later, the place is still steeped in poverty, the kind of generational distress that makes it hard, almost impossible, to imagine a way out.
I think that's one of the problems we face in this country. It's the richest country in the world, but where is the money really going? It's going in the hands of very, very few people, unfortunately. And I would like to change some of that. But this is where I came from. And I think this is where we should start, because there's so much talent here that is held back by lack of opportunity, lack of money, lack of having to hold 4 jobs just to survive.
Perhaps the most startling aspect of this program is its simplicity, the lack of strings. There's plenty of research to support that concept, but for Atwood, it's a matter of trust, of respect and dignity. What he gets for his investment is data that he can use the next time around.
And I want us to show the whole United States what y'all can do, what we can do when we work together as a team to help each other get ahead. And eventually, using the data that we generate here, showing what y'all can do with this, and the good outcomes we almost always see in these kind of programs, reach all 50 states.
The recipients will be randomly chosen from the list of applicants, but already those who work most closely with the many who are qualified find it hard to put into words how much of a difference this program could make.
We are forever grateful to this opportunity. We're excited to learn from it, and we're incredibly honored, truly.
For those who are qualified, 550 will be randomly selected for the program. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Maria Young in Mercer County.
Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Hello June, Mary Hot, Dinosaur Burps, and Blue Dot Sessions. Bill Lynch is our producer. Abby Neff is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editor Chris Julin. You can find us on Instagram @inappalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/insideappalachia to subscribe to our newsletter and stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.